Hello, Puppet. We've got a lot of news to cover today because the Empire Undivided update patch notes are finally here, and by the time you see this video, the embargo for the Hunter and the Beast will have lifted, which means I can post as much campaign content, as much multiplayer content, really any kind of content for the Hunter and the Beast that I want to. So it is quite the auspicious day, and in this video, we're going to be covering the Empire Undivided patch notes, going through, and I must say, fair warning, we are not going to be going through this line by line, because I would be here for 4 hours and waste your entire day if we were going through all of it. So, there will be some stuff, some casualties, that I kind of glance over or don't end up seeing. If you feel like I missed something important in the patch notes, feel free to let me know in the comment section below, and we can discuss it there. But in the interest of saving some time and condensing it down so it doesn't drag on forever, we are going to end up missing some stuff, which ultimately I think is going to be fine. These patch notes are just, they're a behemoth. There's no other way to put it. This thing is gigantic. It's like 15 pages, line by line by line. It's crazy. Balance changes, the Empire overhaul, the Salon rework, multiplayer unit caps. There are a million things to talk about, and we're not going to be able to condense it all into one video, but we'll try to cover the important stuff. And I gotta just bow down to Creative Assembly, because there is one amazing quality of life change that I never thought we'd actually see, and it is going to have a huge impact on my channel and probably the performance for a lot of you guys as well. So if we take a look at graphics and performance bug fixes, take a look at this line. Added an option to the graphics settings to remove corpses over time. Doesn't sound like that big a deal, but as a multiplayer and a campaign content creator, someone who records Total War Warhammer 2 quite a bit, this is a huge deal. This is a godsend for performance. One of the things that you might have noticed in some of my battle replays before, especially in the 3v3s and the 4v4s, where there are just tons of bodies on the field and lots of dead ones after a nice little scrum, essentially performance will start dipping pretty hard into the late stages of a battle. So you might start out at 90 FPS and go down to 60 when lots of explosions are going off. And then as more and more corpses start hitting the floor, more blood spews out, it gets worse and worse, which was a little bit awkward because a lot of time in the late stages of a battle, you'd be down to only a couple single entities. But yet the performance is much worse than when there was a lot more stuff going on screen. This is now an option to remove that entirely, and I must say this is amazing, and it's something that I asked for in the Total War Influencers Discord a while back. If you take a look here, back on July 10th, I asked, if it's possible, can we just make bodies disappear? Because your FPS dips like crazy in replays and in campaign battles where there are lots of dead people on the floor. Well, they apparently took that criticism or question in stride and just added an entirely new feature. This is amazing. In terms of battle replay FPS, instead of dipping into the 30s, in the late stages of the battle, now you're going to be seeing like 90s, 80s, which is going to make watching it more exciting, and honestly make the sieges and the multiplayer battle 3v3s and 4v4s and the sub-commanders and stuff, it's going to make it all run a lot better and be a lot more visually appealing for you as well. So it's not just from a performance perspective from my side of things, also probably going to help a lot of you guys out as well. So having that option, super nice, and in fact, it's very customizable. There's a 30-second timer, a minute timer, a 90-second timer, and then permanent corpses as well. So that's an amazing quality of life change. I'm incredibly excited for that in and of itself. Hats off to CA. Thank you guys so much for that. That's super nice. All right, Empire Overhaul. This is going to be one of the main parts of the free LC, one of the main updates. And actually, before we get into that, I do want to quickly point out something here from Grace. The next update we're planning will focus more on technical maintenance and quality of life improvements rather than faction or race overhauls. So that means no faction overhaul with the next DLC? Correct. So that's actually big news going into the next Lord pack, which we don't know what that will be yet. But we actually, now that we know that it's Lizardmen versus Empire, we can kind of have a pretty good idea of what the next Lord packs will actually entail. Maybe not particularly what the Lords will be, but at least from a faction matchup perspective, I think Skaven versus Dwarfs is very likely. I think we know that Grim and the Grom is almost certainly in the cards, but Eltharion the Grim and Grom the Punch probably not going to be the next update because we know the Greenskins need their faction overhaul. So, Grim and the Grom, probably not the next DLC. It probably means either it's going to be Skaven Dwarfs or Vampire Counts Dark Elves. Now, those are not confirmed yet. They could do Skaven versus Vampire Counts, and they could do Dwarfs versus Dark Elves. But thematically, Skaven Dwarfs probably makes the most sense, which then means Dark Elves and Vampire Counts will be the one left over. So that's big news in and of itself. They will not be doing a faction overhaul next, which means Greenskins will not be getting their overhaul in the next Lord pack. Good to know. Alright. In terms of the Empire overhaul, we know about fort settlements, we know about the enemy within. Balthazar Gelt starting in Solent. He's going to be starting in Fildorf, and he's got the Gold Order as his new faction. New start position there. That's all going to be pretty cool. But the Imperial Authority, and this is actually the best look we've seen at the Empire rework so far. So let's take a quick look at this. Prestige. Essentially, one of the issues with the Empire campaign before was that you'd be in a situation where you can't actually unify the provinces, which was always kind of dumb. The Empire Offices mechanic didn't really give you that much flexibility. You couldn't summon the Elector Counts, you couldn't get them under your control, and so to unify the Empire, you basically had to go to war with them or let them do their own thing, which was super annoying. Now you have a guaranteed way, if you manage your Imperial Authority correctly, to bring them into the fold without murdering them and their families, which is probably a pretty good change. So, Prestige can be used to manage the player's Imperial Authority and is acquired through winning battles. Basically, it's the more cool stuff you do, the more likely people are to actually pledge their allegiance to the flag. Fealty will be a measure of how much influence you have over other factions. So like if a particular lord, Wolfram Hertwig, for example, you want him in the fold, you're going to have to look at his fealty and make sure that's high so that he actually is loyal to you and the Empire. And once that gets high enough, you can bring him into the fold. Summon the Elector Counts lets you get the new Runefangs legendary weapons. There's a Legbiter for Midland. There's a Troll Cleaver for the Ostermark Runefang, and there are a bunch of others. Kurt Helborg wields one. The Runefang of Solend. All that stuff is going to be super nice because now you can kind of make the Elector Counts feel legendary. We don't have a Boris Todbringer update quite yet. Hopefully, the fact that the Knights Panther and the Knights of the White Wolf, the fact that they were not included in this update, alongside Tübingen Guard, means Cult of Ulrich will be coming along sometime later down the line. Maybe in Warhammer 3. I feel like that might be what's going on there. But just the fact that you can get any of these Runefangs and equip them on your quote-unquote generic lords, I think that's a pretty nice little mechanic there. And of course, you also get access to their unique regiments of renown now. So when you assign someone to a particular Elector Count to a province, you unlock their Runefang for that province, and you unlock the unique regiments of renown. We do know that the Knights of More are getting overhauled in terms of their appearance. They were looking a little bit janky before. Now they'll be getting skulls and stuff like that. So by the time September 11th rolls around, they will have a new visual update, which should look pretty good. Got political events, which will affect your fealty levels and your prestige levels and all that. So it sounds like the Empire campaign overhaul is just going to make the whole thing more dynamic, more interesting, give you more diplomatic options, which is very useful because going through and raising Empire settlements so that you can actually control them was kind of dumb. This is going to be a lot more fun and a lot more thematic, a lot more lore friendly, which has me pretty excited. Alright, and so the Empire Reforged, you also got Sylvania and Marienburg, the Wasteland. Both those areas are going to technically be under your control as well in terms of Elector Count provinces. So you can assign an Elector Count to those because technically they are part of the Empire. They've just fallen by the wayside as undead and little mutants run rampant in those territories. The Salon rework has long been awaited. Some of it is good, some of it is bad. They can't wield mixed lords of magic now, which I'm a little sad about. I like seeing 2 spells from each lore. It makes me feel like they have more of a control over the winds of magic than some other factions in the game. We still don't have a Lore of Metal Salon. It seems like we won't be getting a Lore of Heaven Salon, and there is no Death Salon either. But they do have high magic, they do have fire, Life, and Light. Fire and Life are the two new ones. And Life, magic for the Lizardmen. Pretty interesting. You'll be seeing a multiplayer battle replay later today, I think, where you'll be seeing those guys in action. Regrowth and Earthblood heals for days on Dino Blobs. Pretty effing good, I'm not gonna lie. Fire Mage also incredibly useful in some matchups as well. But it looks like there will also be generational traits. So Awakened Salon either hail from the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th spawning. You won't be seeing 1st generation Salon because they are all incredibly powerful, and the majority of them are dead. Although the majority of Salon in general are dead as well. But 2nd, 3rd, or 4th spawnings, the older they are, the more powerful. They're going to get better Winds of Magic Reserves. They'll get better XP that they grant to the army, and a reduction in their overcast miscast chance. And they'll also get better tech and stuff like that as well. Multiplayer unit caps is something people have been asking for a very long time. And this will be going into effect in ranked battles, and you can use it in custom battles as well. I've not played around with it a massive amount yet. I typically, when I play multiplayer, prefer to play someone who is good that I know. I don't actually play that much ranked. So like I'll play with someone like Aerocrastic, or I'll scrim against someone like Pibbington or Romulan Dog, someone like that. I don't typically play that much ranked battles because I don't like getting cheesed. I don't like running into a game and just seeing someone like corner camp or do whatever they can to win ladder battles, because when I know you as an opponent, I know that you're not going to try to cheese me. But this is the kind of thing that will certainly cut down on the spamming, cut down on the single entity spamming, cut down on a lot of the bull crap that's kind of annoying and inherent in Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer. So I have not seen the actual effects from these unit caps. I think that will take a little bit to shake out, but on paper what I've seen so far is pretty good. There are caps on single entities. There's a 5 unit cap on bringing the same unit, so if I want to bring 5 Wildwood Rangers, that's the max I can bring. I can't bring 10 of them. Stegodons across like their multiple unit variants, there are still limits to those, so you can't bring like 3 Stegodons Bolt Thrower variant and then 3 Ancient Stegodon variants. You can't do stuff like that. So the unit caps are pretty well thought out from what I've seen so far. I think this could be a pretty good change. But again, when I'm playing custom battles, I might not use it simply because I know my opponent isn't going to bring something that's ridiculous and break that. So having a little bit more flexibility is nice. Having more options is always nice. I am down for that. As we go down here, we can take a look at some of the headline fixes. This is interesting. That's actually going to get talked about a little bit later on through these patch notes. Campaign bug fixes and improvements. So if we take a look here, slightly revamped Lizardmen and Vampire counts, buildings, trees, and unit unlocks. I don't have any specifics on that at the moment, but the issue with these campaign improvement parts is that they usually don't go too in depth with what the issue actually was. It just says like fix. Okay, well that's very, very useful. There we go. That's good. That's a good change. Vampire Coast can now construct the Vault of Nagash landmark if they occupy the Black Pyramid of Nagash. If you know about the end times, again, not everyone's favorite piece of lore. That's cutting it. Yeah, I mean, I think we all know it's not everybody's favorite thing in the world. But the Vampire Coast in the end times, Luthor Harkin became the Mortarch of the Abyss. They are very closely tied to Nagash because Nagash basically flexed his muscles and said, all vampires, you will bow to me or I'm going to blow your face off from across the world with his elite hacksaws. And so they were very much tied to the Black Pyramid and to Nagash himself. The fact that they can now kind of tie into that, pretty good change, but a relatively minor one, of course. Oak of Ages now has a ruined model when nuked, and Malekith will actually run on his campaign. He actually had a bug recently where he had the Dreadlord animations. I think he had the female Dreadlord animations, and you kind of like saunter around. I don't know exactly what effect this will have other than the fact that he'll now run, but I kind of like the fact that he was kind of swaggy and walking around like, I'm kind of a badass, just walks through the campaign map and didn't really care. When Malekith hurries, he doesn't look quite as awesome, so I don't know. Not a big deal either way. Let's move on here to battle fixes and improvements, because this is where I think the patch notes usually get a little bit more in-depth and talk about what the actual problems were before. So this is a big one right at the start. Melee attack and melee defense bonuses granted by veterancy have been adjusted. So this has a big effect on Regiments of Renown. As we know, when they go up to level 9, as all Regiments of Renown are, they get stat bonuses. And what previously happened with chevrons is you get bigger melee defense increases than you would get melee attack. And so across the board now, they've changed that a bit so that melee defense has been lowered by 1 or 3 across the board basically, and melee attack has been improved. In Warhammer 2, melee defense is a better stat overall, so this could actually have a relatively, and I say relatively, it's still going to be small in the scheme of things, but a relatively large impact on how long battles last. Because when you cut a Regiment of Renown, which are pretty common on the battlefields of Total War Warhammer 2, when you cut their melee defense by 3, that's actually a pretty big change. Typically what you'll see from a unit is when they get to around 50 melee defense, that's where they are very tanky and survivable. When you're below 50, it usually means that that unit is going to be taking more hits, obviously. But that's kind of the cutoff point between like being very tanky and maybe not being quite as tanky. So -3 melee defense for a lot of Regiments of Renown, pretty big deal, and that will also affect when you give veterancy to your regular troops as well. So more melee attack, less melee defense means maybe a little bit shorter battles, but at the end of the day, probably not by that much. It won't be that noticeable, but it does have an effect, so something to be aware of there. Empire cannon towers will now correctly shoot cannonballs. That's pretty good. Legion of Shock will now get Vanguard deployment when armies in Astromancy stance. Norscan Wolf Chariots should now display animations correctly when attacking. Yeah, just a lot of quality of life stuff, honestly. Most of this isn't crazy. There was a big change here, though, that I definitely want to talk about. The Blazing Sun Chapter House in Talabheim has moved from Tier 4 to Tier 3 and no longer requires an armory. This is a big one. This was one of those, well, it's a DLC unit, right? Blazing Sun, Knights of the Blazing Sun are awesome. I think they're one of the coolest cav units in the game. I have never, and I mean never, used them in any of my campaigns, except for Volkmar the Grim, because he starts with one, because their requirements were kind of absurd. It was very hard to actually recruit them and use them. You had to have the armory, you had to be Tier 4, you had to have that particular chapter house. Really annoying. They moved it to Tier 3 now, which is pretty nice, and now they're going to be a lot more accessible, because now instead of being Tier 4, same tier as Demis, which, I mean, why would you recruit Knights of the Blazing Sun when you have Demigraph Knights available, and they're both at Tier 4? It doesn't make any sense. So, now you get them at Tier 3, there's actually going to be a gap there in your campaign where you'll want to use them, which is a really, really nice change. I like that quite a bit. Alright. I think Alistair the White Lion is now immortal from level 1, so you might want to recruit him in some of your high elf campaigns. Let's talk about unit balancing, because this is, it's probably the elements of Total War Warhammer 2 that I know best, and there are some very interesting unit changes, not just from a balance perspective, but there's some complete reworks of units. Some Regiments of Renown have been completely overhauled, which is pretty exciting. So, Beast Lords, -100 cost on foot. What you're going to notice as we go through the character and unit balancing, and by the way, if you're worried about me going over so much of that stuff above, I am going to go back to that. We're going to focus on the unit balancing for now, but I will return and highlight some of the most important changes above as well. So fear not, we will cover some more of that as well. But Foot Lords across the board got a -100 gold decrease, which is really nice. It's really nice because obviously Foot Lords have issues. They have some mass issues. They get bullied. They get knocked over. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it means you mitigate a lot of damage coming in and don't get murdered. Other times it means that combat lords who should be very good at dueling stuff aren't quite as good as they should be. do want to talk about Gorok for a second here. He's a really, really good duelist. He's probably going to be the template for a lot of Footlords going forward. He actually, and lore-wise this kind of makes sense, beats pretty much every Footlord duelist in the game one-on-one. Almost every single one. Quick Head Taker, which he should. I mean, honestly, yes, he's a hero in tabletop, but lore-wise, Gorok is probably a scarier boy than Quick Head Taker is. As scary as Quick is, he is essentially an old blood. He's terrifying, and albino one at that, so he's marked by the old ones. But, I mean, his stat line, that 89 melee attack, 88 melee defense, his armor piercing, that 630 weapon strength when he's got his Mace of Ulamat going. I mean, he's an absolute tanky monster. So, I think he beats Grimgor, pretty sure. So, that might not make too many people happy, but in terms of the Footlords across the board, yeah, he smashes stuff. And he's pretty tanky. Got a lot of mass too. Doesn't seem to get knocked over very easily. So I think that Gorok might end up being kind of a blueprint for how to do Footlords going forward. Grimgor will have his time in the limelight, I am sure of it. But lots of Footlords. For now, instead of getting complete overhauls, just getting that minus 100 cost, which is not bad. That in and of itself is pretty nice. The mounts for a lot of caster lords have been increased. So I think that swing there, I mean, that's a 200 gold swing, right? I could either go for someone like Lokir on foot, or I could go for a Supreme Sorceress on a dragon. It's a 200 gold swing. If Lokir did indeed get a minus 100 gold nerf, then, I mean, that's a big deal, right? That makes the Footlord more attractive. So I think that in and of itself is a good change. Gorbel, faster now, better leadership. Plus 5 leadership is a big buff. It's actually really good. Daddy, that is really nice. Okay, so Minotaurs, however you want to say it. I think a lot of Europe says Minotaur. Where I'm from, we say Minotaur. Doesn't matter. Don't want to have an argument about that one. Plus 18 bonus versus infantry. So, traditionally, the Great Weapon variant were useful because they're good for killing dinos or big, large single entities or cavalry. The shielded variant was useful because they have a shield, and so they have better melee defense and a missile block chance, which is pretty useful. Minotaurs don't have a lot of armor, so having that missile block chance is really nice. But the regular Minotaurs they didn't really have much of a niche, right? Like, they didn't really have a reason to use them. Now, they have lower melee attack, sure, but they have plus 18 bonus versus infantry, which the shielded variant and the Great Weapon variant will not get. So now the unshielded variant has a reason to be brought. They cost more, but 18 bonus versus infantry is no joke. That's really amazing, actually. Like, it's really, really good. So, I don't know if you'll see them in, like, a ton of matchups, but now they have an actual reason to be brought, and they can do some damage like that, for sure. They're going to get really high melee attack with their stat bonuses from that bonus versus infantry and from Blood Greed and all of that. And they're going to get pretty nasty. They're going to be melee blunders, which will be pretty cool. A lot of stuff got Stalk and Vanguard, which is really nice. Ungor Spearman, all variants. So one of the issues the Beastmen had before was that there wasn't a lot of it was kind of nonsensical what units got Vanguard and which ones didn't. Now it looks like pretty much everything in terms of the melee infantry will have Vanguard, which opens up a ton of options in terms of your builds and your ability to deploy all across the map. Because now you can put your meat shields up front and not have your Gors isolated on one flank outside your deployment zone while your Ungors are sitting in your deployment being like, why can't I go join them? There's no reason for that. Big quality of life change there. Like that quite a bit. And Minotaurs can now hide in forests. All variants can. Every single one can hide in forests. Again, kind of a big deal. Beastmen, all about ambushing. The fact they couldn't hide in forests, ridiculous. Now they can. I like that. Alright, Butchers of Kalkengard. Yeah, they're getting the same ROR thing. Lower melee defense, higher melee attack. Chaos Spawn, minus 100 cost. That's a big change too. Going from 1,000 gold to 900. That's gonna... Oh, a giant. Also, I didn't notice that one. Minus 100 cost. So, yeah. You're gonna be seeing a bigger variety of builds from the Beastmen. Better Vanguard options. especially Chaos Spawn for the Beastmen with their poison. 900 gold. Chaos Spawn with poison. You're going to see those in quite a few matchups now, I think. They're not going to be like top tier or anything. They still have a lot of the same problems. Low armor, get shredded by missile fire, that kind of stuff. But they're unbreakable. For 900 gold, Monstrous Infantry, that is not bad. And they have great base damage too. I think it's like 100. Really, really good there. Alright, so I like those changes. That's pretty cool. For Bretonia, ooh, I like that. That's a really nice quality of life change. Plus 10 leadership makes sense, right? These are inhuman knights, essentially. They've been blessed by the lady. They are demigods, almost. They had very low leadership. Very low leadership. I want to say they had like 60 or 65, maybe 70. I don't remember. It was low for a knight unit. So that's been improved dramatically, which is good. But also, we know that Royal Pegasus Knights and a lot of flyers have issues charging stuff. They've tweaked the animation so that more of those will hit on the charge. Now, that was changed also last patch as well, but it seems they've continued to iterate on those balance changes and make sure that they're continuing to improve that. It's pretty good to see that they'll actually be hitting more stuff on the charge, because that's really where they do all their damage. You don't want Pegasus Knights fighting in a long, drag-it-out fight on the ground, because they will get worn down very quickly. They will get surrounded, and once they do, it's game, set, match. Game blouses. Now for Grandma Saggy Bags and the Sex-Starved Freaks of Nagaroth, looks like the Dark Elves are getting the same kind of mount changes that all the other factions are getting. And what you'll notice here is that Combat Lords are essentially getting buffs. It's mostly Foot Lords that are combat-oriented are getting buffs, where the Caster Lords, the ones that have more utility and typically have a lower base cost, are getting cost increases, not just for themselves, but for their mounts too. I guess actually more for their mounts. Yeah, for their mounts. So plus 100 cost on the cold one, because the stat differential you're getting is bigger when you take a Supreme Sorceress and put her on a cold one, as opposed to take a Combat Lord and put him on a cold one. So I like those changes, because you're essentially getting more value out of that mount when you're with a Caster Lord, who's very squishy base. It makes sense that you pay a little bit extra to get them quite quote-unquote tanky. So I don't think that's a bad change at all. Now, one of the biggest changes for the Dark Elves here is that the Cold One Chariot is getting plus 100 cost. I think this is fair. Some people aren't going to like that, but the Cold One Chariot is probably the best chariot unit in the game. They're dirty in terms of running over infantry, they're very tanky, and that missile attack they have is very damaging. Not only are they good for shooting up single entities and shooting cavalry out on the flanks, but they'll actually continue firing when they're in melee too, so it dramatically increases their DPS. And the changes to Rampage really made Dark Elf Cold One Chariots a little bit overbearing. I think they were a little bit too strong, because the way Rampage worked before, yeah, essentially they'd get better stats, but you had the fact that they would Rampage, and so Rampage was scary. But then they nerfed Rampage and made it not such a big deal, but they kept all those stat bonuses. So Cold One Chariots were overtuned for sure. I think that plus 100 cost is perfectly reasonable. They're just really good. Dark Elves, for their RORs, again, melee defense getting lowered, melee attack increased. That'll be true for pretty much every ROR in the game, so we won't mention that again. But for Dwarfs here, Dwarfs getting a lot of changes. So, Foot Lords, whether you're Ungrim, whether you're a Rune Lord, blah blah blah, it doesn't really matter. You are going to have more of a chance to ignore incoming damage in terms of your, I guess not damage, but not get shuddered, not get stun locked when you get attacked by something bigger than you. And everything in Warhammer is bigger than a dwarf, so yeah, that's pretty nice. They're getting more mass, so knocking them over gonna be more difficult. And actually their base cost for some of these guys, the Rune Lord and Rune Smith, is getting changed. Now the biggest change for the dwarves here is actually for their Runes of Wrath and Ruin. So this is a huge change, and ultimately I'm not exactly sure I like it. It depends. I don't know how the meta will shake out from it. I'll just say that for now I'm a little bit reserved, a little bit nervous that it might make playing dwarfs cancerous. So again, it is cancerous to be a dwarf player and see chariots just completely run over your battle lines. I don't think anybody, well, unless you don't like dwarfs, really enjoys getting run over by those things. There are ways to counter chariots and single entity monsters, of course, as the dwarfs. They have lots of AP, they have giant slayers, they have tools to deal with that stuff. But against a very good player who knows how to micro stuff like high elf nobles on chariots, it can be kind of overbearing to deal with that. And so one of the changes here, Rune of Wrath and Ruin and Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, no longer is it going to be deleting enemy infantry or cavalry like it did before, where you would cast it and it would kill models and deal damage over time and slow. Now it's a pure slow, minus 72% speed and 72% charge speed. So the range on it is getting increased from 150 to 200. That's a really long cast range. 200 meter cast range is super long. And you combine that with artillery and thunderer fire, that's pretty brutal. So now if you want to use chariots against the dwarfs, you're going to have to keep them further back and wait till the later stages of the battle. I've got to say, I think that this could get kind of unpleasant to play against and be a little bit cancerous, because what you're going to see a lot now probably is Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, so a Rune Lord and a Rune Smith, just slowing everything on the field. Like, you get a minus 72% slow, you get a minus 72% slow, you get a minus 72% slow, and then Thunder or Focus Fire will come in. So obviously, Thunderers won't be able to fire that 200 meters. You won't really want to cast that at the max range, generally speaking, because unless you bring a ton of artillery, you won't be able to capitalize on that damage. But it could get a little bit weird. I like the dwarfs having more options against chariots. I like that element. I will say I've never been a big fan of the direct damage spells, so seeing it not like take half the HP off Dragon Princes of Kalador will be cool as well. I want the dwarves to have more options, but this looks maybe a little bit overbearing. We will have to see. We will have to see. I think that, man, Master 36 seconds of 72% slow. Yeah, dude, I don't know. That seems like a lot. That seems like a lot. And the dwarfs are probably one of the quote-unquote weaker factions in Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer right now, but the idea that there's some trash tier faction is ridiculous. They and pretty much all factions in Mortal Empires are very strong in capable hands. And they have a lot of favorable matchups, period, right now anyway. So I hope that doesn't break stuff, but we'll have to see. I'm not going to pass judgment on it yet because I haven't seen it in action. But that's crazy. Minus 72% slow. Pretty good. Alright, let's go back to dwarfs. Yeah, the ethereal units, they got the same buffs there. Flame cannon. So people were asking what projectile calibration area is. That is the area of effect where a missile shot, whether it be from artillery or range unit, can miss. So the smaller the calibration area, the more accurate the unit is. Excuse me. So yeah, essentially that is just accuracy in its own way. So it looks like it minus 36% calibration area. That sounds like a buff to me. That should be a buff, unless I'm reading that wrong. That should mean that the area of which it can miss is smaller, which means flame cannon. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so it is going to be more expensive, but you're getting better AP, you're getting better damage, you're getting a smaller calibration area, and more range as well. So that's pretty nice. Minor busting charges, 25 cost. See these in a lot of matchups. Really good unit for the cost there, so don't mind them getting a little bit of a nerf in terms of their price, but they are getting +2 melee attack too, so it seems worth it. Probably not even really a nerf overall. Empire. Empire is getting a lot of changes. I did not realize that Pegasus could hide in forest. Makes sense that they cannot. They are a flying unit after all. Imperial Griffin, plus 560 health on Ultra. I imagine that was probably an issue where they just weren't getting as much HP as they should have had on Ultra. That's probably not a buff, just a fix. Because it's not happening on large or any of the other unit sizes. There was one Amethyst Wizard. Where are you at? That's probably in, yeah. Let's take a look. Amethyst. They had a very weird... Oh, wow, there are a lot of patch changes from HP. Here we go. Amethyst Wizard HP will now scale correctly. I think it wasn't scaling properly before, so they would have a bigger HP pool on like all unit sizes, which was really awkward. They were like incredibly tanky for no reason, so that bug has been fixed, which is nice. And, oh yeah, let's take a look at this. This is tied to the Empire, so we'll talk about that. Exorcism, Lore of Light passive. This was a kind of useless one before, because it only worked against undead. So there was no reason to bring the lore passive, the lore attribute at all, in the majority of circumstances. Now, it actually works against all factions, because it buffs your own stuff now, instead of debuffing the enemy. So I think it was a -4 leadership hex for all undead. Now it's +4 leadership for your own stuff, and immune to psych map wide every time you cast a spell with the Lore of Light. That's really good. That's really good. Immune to psych map wide every time you cast. You might be seeing low cooldown spells like Frost Protection all the time now in Lore of Light caster. You might want to invest in that extra spell and not just get none of Ammontok, because it means you're getting a lot more utility out of your caster. I like that. That's pretty cool. And it's thematic too. It's all about swelling their courage up from within. So I think that's a very nice change. I mean, again, I don't think there should be any design where you're essentially in a situation where it only works against one faction, or Vampire Coast, Vampire Counts, and Tomb Kings. Now you get to use it in every matchup. Sunmaker, oh wow, +1 melee attack. Huge! Huge buff to them. They're just going to be murdering like Shaggus in melee now. That's really cool. Great stuff. Demigryph Knights, the regular variant, the Lance variant, -50 cost. Cool. You don't see them very often. I can't really think of like any matchup really where people bring those. They're a good unit for sure. I mean, their stat line is incredible, but Demigryph Knights and Halberds are just so good at killing monsters, and that's really where the Empire needs their cav. They want their cav to win the cav fight, so you want the bonus for large, so Halberds are always brought. Now, maybe, there's a reason to bring Demigryph Knights. I mean, -50 cost is a pretty big deal there. The Steam Tanks are getting their decals and their textures increase in resolution. There was a big issue where they would kind of look really ugly when you zoomed in on them. I was noticing that in quite a few of my replays recently, in the some commanders and stuff, so nice change there. Greenskins. Grimgore. Ooh, yeah, he's getting some of that dwarf lovin'. +10 hit reaction ignore chance. From a gameplay perspective, I have no idea what kind of impact this will have, but I like it nonetheless. I think that's nice. Yeah, there aren't really any important changes here except Giant getting -100 cost. So just the ROR stuff and the mount stuff. High Elves, no nerf to Star of Avalorn. That's a pretty crazy heal. I wouldn't mind if that had gotten touched up a little bit more. But it has been touched in previous patches, so maybe they feel like they're okay with it. I still think Alariel is by far the best Lord on the High Elf roster. And she could maybe use like a few more tweaks here or there. A little bit too ubiquitous, but overall, I mean, I still think she's in an okay spot. She's just probably a little bit too good. Unless she's completely overbearing as she was on the Queen and the Crone patch. Fireborn and Dragon Princes in general, -100 mass. Dragon Princes did have pretty crazy mass. I don't really mind that change. Princess, Projectile, I don't know what that is. And more anti-infantry for Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers. Okay. Lizardmen. Krotgar gets more leadership. He's the oldest of the eldest Old Bloods. He should indeed have very good leadership. I like that. And one thing that is important to note is that Slann actually count as rare now. So in the unit caps, usually you'll have a cap of, I think it's three rare unit single entities. Slann count as that. So if you want to go double Slann build, you still can, but you'll be using 2 of your 3 slots, so you'll only be able to afford like 1 big dino, I believe is how those unit caps will work now. Which kind of makes sense. If you're going to be going for Mazda Mundi and Lord Croak on top of that, yes, you can get a Dread Saurian, yes, you can get an Ancient Stegodon, but you won't be able to then spam those single entities, go for the crazy heals and the crazy Bubble of Note blobs with the 44% ward save stacking and all that. I think that's a pretty good change there. Unit caps are obviously a new implementation, but I think that's a decent change. So we've got Ooh, Lord Croak, plus 300 MP cost. That is certainly one way to balance him. Yeah, he was very cheap. I think his base cost before was like 1600, 1700. Maybe not base cost, but when he has all like his normal kit, he was like 1700. He's about 2040 now. So that's a big nerf, but he was probably too strong in multiplayer with what he was able to do in terms of his casting. I mean, the fact that he deals no friendly fire damage, the fact that he's got that 44% ward save in an AoE, he was super strong. So yeah, he needed to be more expensive for sure. The casting he has, it was nerfed a little bit in this patch as well. I think it's like minus 8% damage on like level 1 or something, minus 3% on level 3. Really, again, you're not going to notice those changes at all. Like, you click that on a blob and the blob will disappear. It's as simple as that. It's really not going to affect campaign at all. His DPS is going to be amazing, and he's still going to get like 500, 600 kills every single time, at least, in like against Skaven and that kind of stuff. But I think that they're tweaking him a little bit more there, simply because now Gorok starts with him, and so they don't want him to be like incredibly overbearing, but he's still going to be anyway. Like, the changes there probably not really going to have any functional impact on your campaigns whatsoever. And obviously 300 MP cost won't affect campaigns either. Salamander Hunting Pack, minus 10 armor. Now uses splash attack against small targets, so that will make them better against infantry. I didn't realize they were using like single entity attacks on them, but now they have actual splash damage, which makes sense because when you see them explode in the middle of infantry formations, it was looking like it was splashing, so I'm surprised it wasn't. They're losing AP, they're getting more base damage. Overall, I do not know if that's a buff or a nerf. It sounds like they might be worse against armored monsters now, but they will be better against infantry, would be my guess, looking at those changes. Kroxigors, they're getting a little bit of their melee damage back. I think that's a revert from last patch. Secondons have less armor. And Star Chamber Guardians are getting plus 5 missile block chance on top of the normal changes. Horde of Sotek, and oh yeah, I forgot. Red Crested Skinks, where are they? Are more expensive now. They're 50 more, I believe. They were 575, now they're 600. So plus 25 gold on them. I can't find the patch note there. Red Crested? Yeah, plus 25 cost. Okay, yeah. So that's a big change, actually. That's a pretty big change. They were already a good unit. They're going to be a little bit less ubiquitous now, I think. Really good against Dwarfs, really good against Chaos, really good in a lot of different matchups, actually. But now with that 600, they might be kind of a little bit not so good at 600 price point. Like, that's pretty impactful. When you've got 3 or 4 of them in an army, 100 extra gold, that's a pretty big difference. Norska is getting a lot of nerfs. A lot of nerfs. Mammoths. Their mounts getting less HP. Plus 200 cost. My god. I don't know that I like that very much. Like, Mammoths were good. For sure. Plus 200 cost? That's a huge nerf. And minus 700 health on top of that. They're just smacking them. So I think in isolation, some of these changes are fine, but altogether, I feel like they are a little bit mean to Norska. Miststalkers and Fimir Warriors, they do have better leadership now. A lot better leadership, which is a big deal, because they were easy to tear out before. Less melee attack, plus 100 cost. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it looks like an overall nerf to them. And it might be. Plus 100 cost is a big deal, but the plus 10 leadership is huge. That's huge buff. I think they were at 60 leadership before. They're at 70 now. So they've got way better staying power in terms of, like, morale shock. And that's really where you want them to be, right? Like, you want them to have better staying power against monsters. Against terror-causing monsters, like Terrorgeist. Against dinosaurs, that kind of thing. It's a big buff. But overall, don't know exactly how that will shake out yet. Mammoths, their War Shrine is getting changed. Actually, I'm going to take a look at here because there is another thing in the patch notes down below. Giver of Glory, removed Unbreakable on that single target buff, but now you get plus 26 melee attack and 13 more seconds on it. 3 more uses. I like this. This is a really cool change to the War Shrine. I personally never used the unit ever. I can't tell you the last time I saw someone use this in a competitive multiplayer game. The Unbreakable was kind of useless. It didn't really help you in most situations. You got way more cast now, and now you have a buff on it that will actually let a unit chunk through an enemy formation, which is much more useful than just not routing. I like this change. I think this is one of the coolest changes in the patch. Completely reworking the ability, making it a lot more useful. I think it's pretty cool. Alright. But yeah. Way less mass. Don't know the functional change there, but minus 500 mass sounds pretty large. And apparently was not getting a forest terrain penalty before, but now it is. So Norska, yeah, they're the Mammoths are sad boys now. Wah. I'm kind of sad about that. Skaven, Jezzails are getting a range nerf. A lot of changes to Jezzails. Minus 25, so they were at 300 range before, now they're at 275. Less melee defense. Minus 6 melee defense is a big deal, actually. That's a big deal. That's a lot more hitting when a unit finally closes the gap on them. They have a wider projectile calibration area, which means they are less accurate. And the Natty Bubos, I think they have longer base range than Jezzails. So they might be back to like 300 instead of 325. So they're shooting at like the normal range of Jezzails now, but I could be wrong about that. But minus 10 melee defense, my god. Yeah, that hurts. Do something about halberds, man. Like, plus 1 melee defense is not going to cut it. Now, they do have more single entities. They have more entities in a unit, so that is more impactful than it would be for a unit with less models, but I don't know. Stormvermin and halberds, they've been trashed for a very long time. I would not mind seeing that change. Nothing crazy with the Skaven. Tomb Kings. Apparently there were a lot of large monsters that were not getting forest penalties, which is weird. That must have been a bug. Now they do. Blessed Legion of Demonetized getting plus 20 reload skill and minus 25 cost. That's a big buff. That's a huge buff there. Kepler Guard plus 7 melee defense and 9 bonus versus infantry. Did they have a bonus versus infantry before? I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure about that. Now, there are a couple RORs coming up here that I'm very excited about. Big reworks on them. I'll cover them in a second, but let's see. Don't want to miss anything too important. There's a big nerf on HP to zombies now, I believe. Yeah, huge. So I think they're going from like 8,800 HP to 8,100. It's about 700 HP per zombie unit. That's a pretty big deal. And minus 5 leadership. Yeah, their front line not going to be anywhere near as tanky or grindy as it was before. So obviously they have quote-unquote trash tier zombies, but they all had such huge HP pools and they're unbreakable, and you could feel so many of them that cutting through a Vampire Coast front line was very hard in a lot of circumstances because you'd just be getting shredded by handgun fire the entire time. Now, looks like getting through that will be a little bit easier. So that is definitely a nerf to the Vampire Coast overall. Night Terrors, minus 3 melee defense. Looks like a lot of nerfs across the board. Oh, but Depth Guard are getting more HP. So this will make them a little bit more tanky. I think this translates to about 800 HP buff. So I think they were at... No, it's not 800 HP. I think it's like more like 300 or 400. I think they were at like 4,600 HP. I think they're at like 4,900 now. So it's not a huge buff, but it is a big deal. Bloated Corpse, going to be more useful now at minus 75 gold. And Silastra getting a buff there too. Interesting. Lamprey's Revenge. This is a unit that is going to be super good now. So the minus 4 melee defense, you think, oh, that kind of sucks. This is the same thing with a lot of the RORs. But it's different for a unit like Lamprey's Revenge because they have very high base melee defense. I think they had like 54. Now they're going to be at like 50. But like I said, any unit above that 50 melee defense threshold, typically very tanky. Lamprey's Revenge, high armor, regen, high melee defense anyway. That +3 melee attack is going to make them a better unit, I think. It's going to make them really good in prolonged fights. They already were, but even better now. I don't think you're going to feel that melee defense change very much, but the melee attack change, you probably will. So that's pretty cool. Vampire counts. Not seeing anything super interesting there. Oh, Chill Guys +5 Oh my god. Wow. The spectral units, the ethereal units, are going to be pretty mean. +5 melee attack on Chill Guys. Holy balls. And no nerf to it whatsoever. No melee defense nerf there at all. So, yeah. +5 melee attack. That's a huge buff. Huge buff. Alright. RORs for Warriors of Chaos and Wood Elves. There are two I want to draw your attention to right now that are super cool. For the first one, well, actually there are quite a few changes on both. Take a look at, where are you at though? Wild Hunters of Kurnis. Completely reworked. Completely new unit now. No Guardian ability, which is honestly probably a good thing because Orion is still not fast enough to keep up with his Wild Riders. I would like to see his speed get increased to like 65, heavy cav speed. Not Wild Rider speed, I don't want to see him running around at 85 speed, but 62, 65 would be nice. I think he's at 54 right now. We'll make it easier for him to keep up with his Wild Riders. But anyway, Guardian Aura, not there anymore. So they will not be giving him physical resist. But instead, Wild Hunters of Kurnis now, the Wild Rider Regiment of Renown, now have 13 bonus versus large, which is really good in a lot of matchups. Where the Wood Elves traditionally struggle is in the cav fight, and because if you don't win the cav fight, you can't win the mobility game, and they need to win the mobility game to enforce their will in the skirmish aspect of the game. And so now 13 bonus versus large helps those guys kill cav way easier. +2 melee attack, a little bit more expensive, and they have magical attacks as well, so they side through physical resist. Big deal. It's a big deal. That completely changes that unit. It makes them way more viable. Way more viable. Orion now has Vanguard. Yes, thank you. He can now Vanguard deploy with his Wild Riders. Might not be able to keep up with them, but can at least be with them when the match starts and do some crazy Vanguard shenanigan stuff. That's a really cool change. Hawk Riders, they actually will fire their first volley faster. That change has needed to happen for a very long time. Good to finally see that. Wildwood Rangers, -100 cost. -100 cost. They have been nerfed on the melee damage and AP, but they're better now. 100%. Instead of 1,000 gold, they're 900. You're going to see them as a front line against Chaos and Dwarfs and Armored Factions now. Almost guaranteed. 900 gold for that stat line, very impressive. They're going to be good. This is a unit you don't see at all really in multiplayer. I think you'll see them in some matchups now, which is pretty cool. Hawkeyes of Drakira and Waywatchers in general kind of got dumpstered a bit. Way less health per entity, less run speed, way less melee defense, -4 melee defense and -8 melee defense. This was one of the things that kept them kind of survivable when they got charged. No longer. And they got more cost. So instead of being 1,100, they are now 1,150. Yeah, Waywatchers, they can be a little bit cancerous, they can be a little bit abusive. And their melee defense is probably a bit too high. So overall, they are less good now for sure, but they'll still be really useful in some matchups. I just think they're not going to be as much of an auto-include as they were before. I don't think they're like going straight into the trash can there, but it's still a big change. Branch Wraith now has immune to Psych. Alright, so for Chaos, Chaos Spawn, -100 cost. Summoners of Rage, +15 armor, +3 melee attack, and +50 cost. Swords of Chaos, like the Wild Hunters of Kurnis, completely reworked. +10 melee attack, +3 melee defense, +10 AP damage. They lost their bonus versus infantry, but they got more base damage, and they got more expensive. So this is a buff overall to the unit, without question. Bonus versus infantry on Swords of Chaos was kind of useless before, because you don't really care about being good against infantry really as Chaos. You're going to be good in that matchup anyway. You're going to be good at killing enemy infantry. What you needed from Swords of Chaos was them to be more all-purpose, and now they are. Plus 10 melee attack is a gigantic buff to them. They're going to be way better than they were before, and we'll probably see them a lot more in multiplayer as well. This is trolly. Very trolly. Minus 10 missile resist on Sartorial. I don't hate that change. I think Lords of Change are too tanky right now. Probably have too much mass. I think Sartorial is a bit overbearing in a lot of matchups. I think that's a good change for sure. I like to be able to actually be able to shoot him. 70% missile resist or whatever he was at before was pretty ridiculous. So lowering that, I don't mind. Summon Unbindings, now split into 3 different phases with different colors. Blue for stable, orange for weak, and red for critical. Which also changes how fast they unbind as well, I think. So when the unit starts to crumble, it will be in this stage for 30 seconds, and then it'll go critical, red, for 5, and then it'll just like disappear during that time. So it seems like that's been... It's probably ultimately the same, like, crumbling time overall, but the HP loss will probably be a little bit smaller during this first stage, during quote-unquote, or week, that 30-second period, and then the 5-second it just goes boom. So I think it'll probably be not really much of a functional change, but there will be an actual visual indicator for it, which is good. Deliverance Vita has been nerfed again. I think that's because Gorak starts with them. A lot of single entity sniping tools have been nerfed. Fireball was OP, no question about it. So they have nerfed its accuracy for one. It was too good against low armor lords, like Lord Skrolk, like well, really any dismounted foot lord that had low armor. It was too good against. So they've changed it to do less penetration, less base damage, a little bit less AP, but the Overcast now deals more AP damage, less base damage. So basically, if you overcast it now, it goes for more AP, is the difference there. It's interesting. Makes sense. Robonicus nerfed, Spirit Leech nerfed, Soul Stealer nerfed. Effigy of a Git nerfed. Final Transmutation nerfed. Good across the board. All those spells are annoying. I'm fine that they're in the game, but they're still obnoxious. And see if there are any... Ooh, Fist of Gork, plus 7 duration. It's actually pretty big. Baroness Time Warp? Really? Oh, just the upgraded version got less cost. That's a really good spell. It's like, they're buffing that? But yeah, that's pretty much it. I just went through the rest of the changes. I went up top and looked through everything, and there's nothing, like, that I really need to get talked about. There's nothing there that I think is going to blow your mind or anything. There's just a lot of, like, minor quality of life changes or little fixes that here and there will be useful. Tori, Kazrak One Eye, he took his eye. He's, coming in hot with the minus 100 cost and the minus 50 cost on a boarded warhorse and on foot, which is pretty cool. I'm telling you guys, man, I really want to see a Cult of Ulrich update. The fact that Knights Panther, Knights of the White Wolf, and Tugan Guard did not get added at all in the RORs in this update makes me think that they are still very much on the table. And believe me when I say that CA understands and knows people want them. So I don't know when that will happen or if it ever will. I don't know if the Empire will ever get more DLC, but it seems like they're holding that back for an update at some point, which would be really, really dope. So besides that, I mean, in the interest of trying to keep it under an hour, which we might not quite be able to do, I think we'll pretty much call it here. The Hunter and the Beast coming out very, very soon. A lot of nice changes in this update for sure. A lot of nice quality of life changes. Replays are going to run smoother for you, especially when we're talking about the big 3v3 and 4v4 siege battles and the sub-commanders and stuff. Not that they were looking bad before, but the body disappearing is such a nice quality of life change, and a lot of the unit balancing as well. We're seeing units that were kind of trash before get some buffs, and some RORs get completely reworked, which is really, really cool. So, this the Hunter and the Beast update will be dropping September 11th, and the embargo, by the time this video goes up, will have been lifted. Only thing I can't do at this point, I believe, is show cutscenes or show off Mortal Empire's campaign for Empire. That will be allowed on the 9th and the 11th, respectively. So, see what can be done there. May do some streaming as well, but I do have a battle replay coming out later today. We'll try to get to work on that ASAP, and lots of content coming your guys' way very, very soon. Hope you guys have been enjoying all this stuff. I certainly have. It's a very fun patch. It's a very fun DLC, and I will be doing a lot of work for it in the coming days and weeks. Hope you guys enjoyed this, maybe kind of boring for some of you, patch note overview, but a lot of you guys like this kind of thing to just kind of chill, relax, and maybe for the next one, I'll end up streaming it, but this time it just didn't end up working out. So, again, hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one.